welcome back to Detonation. Look, we just had a bit of an issue. Gennady's going to take over and continue with question 6. Thank you, everyone. Continue, Gennady. Thank you.
Thank you, Steele, for addressing this technical issue. Once again, my name is Gennady Stolyarov II, Chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party. We are here in the middle of quite an interesting debate, the 4th virtual debate among the U.S. Transhumanist Party presidential candidates. We are currently discussing question 6 from U.S. Transhumanist Party Secretary Pavel Ilin, who asks, how will you reform the healthcare system within the United States in order to ensure and accelerate the arrival of life extension accessibility of these therapies? Candidate Ben-Zion, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. This is something that we must do. It is, as I've mentioned, the first pillar of the United States Transhumanist Party, life extension. It is the most talked about issue in all of these organizing documents and within our organization. And there are many kinds of initiatives that we can be doing. I mentioned this wonderful article talking about Israelis incorporating personalized medicine and digitalization into their public health service, and the idea that aging is a disease. If we have a public consensus on this point, and we begin to legislate and organize our civil society in other ways around this idea, we can save ourselves a lot of pain, so to speak. So we can be focusing on this prevention. We can be focusing on this constant oversight of citizens. We can be focusing on these life extension interventions that will shift this money. We spend many trillions of dollars in this country, as I mentioned, on what is effectively end-of-life care. And we don't, of course, want to harm people who are in that system today. We don't begrudge them those services, but we can be doing a lot better. We can prevent them from ever being an extremis. We can do that by building out a public health service that has the digitalization and personalized medicine and longevity at its center. And in doing so, we can allow them to benefit from these preventative measures. As Benjamin Franklin famously said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And this is what we can do in the public health service. And in doing so, we can be at the cutting edge of public health in this 21st century. I mentioned before a few other podcasts that I've done with people on this subject, people who are very devoted to this subject. I think of Paul Spiegel, who has a keen legal mind and a very deep understanding of the medical world, and is working very hard to see that these kind of things become a reality. My running mate and I have had dealings with high-level officials in Estonia to discuss these kind of digitalization efforts. Of course, we know from our other talks that Estonia is effectively a world leader in e-governance, and they are the only country that has a fully fledged i-voting system, a blockchain voting system, like the one promised in the Futurist New Deal for America. And because they have done this due diligence, because they have done this basic work of building a public health service, of beginning to use digitalization in many ways through various e-services, more robustly in their civil society. Now they are also on the cusp of doing what the Israelis are purported to be doing, building a longevity public health service that focuses on prevention. And that costs, in time, I believe in very short time, pennies on the dollar to operate. And that is also a point that should not go unheeded. It's very fine to hear other candidates talking about freedom in the abstract, but the best sort of freedom that we can all hope for is the freedom to live well, to live long, and to prosper. And to achieve that, we must be willing to take a stand, to build new public policy initiatives, to support private sector programs and research, and to do things that we know we must do as life extensionists. And some of those things involve privatization. We do need, and similar, it really depends on the situation. I don't believe that I agree with candidate Shatke in privatizing all of these bodies. But we do need a full and robust right to try. This will have many good things that will derive from this, streamlining, shortening the pipeline for medicines coming to market, lowering the cost of those medications. This is something that allows people in our community to make use of new life extension medications as soon as they become available. All of these things we must do to build a society that will sustain a universal longevity escape velocity. Thank you. I'll bank the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Candidate Benzaya. So you spoke for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. We will subtract 100 seconds from your future speaking slots. And next we proceed to Candidate Shatke. Candidate Shatke, how will you reform the health care system within
many of the things
States
that we know right now? Many of the things that we know right now that can achieve additional healthy life are blocked in America because of FDA rules. Stem cell therapies, medicines that have been demonstrated and are being used in other countries are blocked by the FDA. So the first and foremost thing we need to do is remove the FDA from the issue, so that people can get the therapies that they decide are best for their life extension. The accessibility and the cost of healthcare in America is caused by two things. One, automatic government markdowns in pricing, where Medicare sometimes requires as much as an 85% just markdown. And so obviously they have to charge 6 times as much in order to get what they really need to from Medicare. The AMA has set up a cartelization of the medical profession in order to do a monopoly position, and we need to break that monopoly position. So I propose a non-government entity set up by the U.S. government that would independently license additional doctors, and those doctors would at the very least be able to practice in VA hospitals, in the military, and on places that took Medicare patients, Medicaid, so that those licenses would still be very valuable and useful, and that would increase the competition in the medical industry, which would bring medical care to more people at a better price throughout the country. So that's the two-prong approach. We get rid of the government messing with the market, and then we get rid of the monopolistic AMA stranglehold on doctors. And so that I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Candidate Shatke. You will have 19 seconds carried over to your future speaking times. And now we proceed to Candidate Matt Taylor. How will you reform the healthcare system within the United States in order to ensure and accelerate the arrival of life extension therapies and the availability of those therapies?
Well, thank you, Chairman, and Steele, for their quick action there to get us back online, because it's important that we get these the message out to the public, and this is right now our best forum. Hopefully we'll expand in the future. My goal is to work with legislators to provide a wider access to life-saving and life-extending medicine, including by providing a public Medicare option. No family should lose a loved one because they can't afford treatment. Nobody should be denied the best of care because their insurance company wants to save money. No one should go into debt or be forced to declare bankruptcy because of the high cost of medical treatment. When I needed surgery and radiation treatment, My wife spent hours on the phone arguing with the insurance company that my treatment should be covered. And we sent many letters appealing the insurance company's decision to deny certain parts of my care because my doctors, who were the best we could find in the region and among the best in the nation, they were out of state. And so therefore they cost the insurance company a little more money. In the time when I needed her most, my wife, when she was already stressed to the max because of my cancer, she had to argue with a company that only wanted to save money, that didn't care about the quality of my treatment. That shouldn't happen. Now, I was fortunate that we were able to use our savings to pay the difference in what they wouldn't cover, but others are not so fortunate. Public option would prevent this and drive down healthcare costs overall. And life extension and anti-aging need to be part of that coverage, as well as mental health services. We need to prevent illness as much as treat it so that all Americans can live long, healthy lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 50 seconds to your future speaking times. And now we will proceed to question number 7 of our virtual debate. Question 7 is from our member Mike DeVerde. And Mr. DeVerde asks, would you support increases in funding for the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, to be used for basic research into transhumanist technologies? If so, what federal departments and programs, if any, would you cut simultaneously? So, Candidate Ben-Zion, you have 3 minutes for that question.
Thank you, sir. I do have some thoughts on this subject. And I spoke to my friend, Dr. Dan Elton, who's been kind enough to endorse the futurist New Deal for America. Dr. Dan Elton of the National Institutes of Health. He does have some firsthand knowledge of this very concern. And so we were able to speak at length on this subject recently. And in fact, we've done talks before. He's been kind enough to participate in some of these things, including coming on the Futurist New Deal podcast. And we're going to do another talk on this subject. There are many ways that we can be courting or otherwise facilitating this good life extension work, finding researchers in this field and bringing them into this organization. Of course, we need to be shifting the focuses of these organizations to better public health outcomes. As I've said many times, I may be sounding like a broken record, treating aging as a disease and adjusting our initiatives and undertakings accordingly. We also have to resist the urge to seize upon every flimsy pretext, particularly for cutting medical research. It's been done in the past, and we don't want to see it happening, particularly when so many lives are at stake as we are on the verge of radical life extension. So whether it is in the public or private sector, we must support this good work. And this is truly the best way to hasten a longevity escape velocity at a civilizational level. I will bank the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Ben-Zion. We will add 81 seconds to your future speaking slots. Next, we proceed to Candidate Chatke. Candidate Chatke, would you increase funding for the NIH? And if so, what federal departments and programs would you cut simultaneously?
I think that if we privatize the National Institute of Health rather than keep it as a government-funded entity, and provide a tax incentive where the corporations are allowed to write off any medical R&D expenses, including money donated to the NIH. I think that would be a much more direct method of making basic research happen better and faster. Government grants are of necessity a an inefficient thing. It is merely a side effect of it being a government grant. You can't avoid that. And as for federal departments and programs to cut simultaneously, there are a number of them. We can get, while I am in full support of private funding of the arts and humanities, the government, it does not have that mandate. And so I believe that we could endow a privatized National Institute of Health with a much better outcome than if we continue under government oversight with politics involved.
Thank you, Candidate Chatke. We will add 84 seconds to your future speaking slots. Next, we proceed to Candidate Taylor. Would you support increases in funding for the NIH? And if so, what federal departments and programs would you cut simultaneously?
Thank you, Mr. DeVerde, for this question. This is a major pillar of my new vision. Publicly funded research is the best option and really the only good option, because the results of that research need to be made available to all. I worry if the case that Mr. Shatke has put forward, corporations will keep this research hidden for themselves. They're in it for profit, while public research becomes the property of all to be pursued with further research as it's made available to more and more scientists. With the brightest medical and scientific minds focused on developing medicine and technology, we can improve all of our lives. Currently, the NIH invests about $40 billion into medical research. About 25 times that, almost $1 trillion, just shy of $1 trillion, is spent on military and defense spending. For half of my life, we've been at war. It's time we end that war, we bring our troops home, and we redirect some of that spending to projects that will benefit all of us, including greater investment in the NIH.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 90 seconds to your future speaking times. And thank you to all candidates for addressing question 7. We proceed to question 8, once again from Secretary Pavel Ilin. What do you consider to be the best approach to achieve a universal basic income? And why is it the best approach? Candidate Ben-Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Wonderful question from Pavel. Some wonderful discussion of this in our podcast, which I mentioned. Please go back and watch it. This man has a lot of insights into life extension and into technofuturism and many, many wonderful things to say about basic income. So I would say that overwhelmingly the best approach for this country is a federal land dividend originated by the founder of this party, Zoltan Istvin, and continued as a kind of tribute to him, and also because it is a very sound notion, continued in our futurist New Deal for America. That's the ticket. In this podcast that I mentioned, Pavel Ilin said, in posing this question to all of us, he described a basic income as a game changer. Those people who take an austerity view of this are not looking at the ways in which this would add many, many trillions of dollars to our economy, and more importantly, vast human development and real quality of life steps by taking this bold step of supporting a middle-class basic income for all citizens age 18 to 63. The collapse of our middle class, it's not just an accident. It is a result of corporatist policies going back some decades that have been insinuated into our two-party system by men like Charles Koch. The very kinds of policies that Mr. Shatke would tend to like to see continue. These are things that have hurt our middle class. And had we not had this shadow party in the form of the Koch network I believe our country would look much more like modern Germany. Not a perfect place, but a place that does have fairer wages and the kinds of infrastructure to support a healthy middle class. Because here in the United States, we have 55% of workers now working in artificially low-wage service jobs and paying artificially high housing costs. And this problem is only going to get worse in the near term, in the face of AI and automation. And it's why I've often described the futurist New Deal for America's federal land dividend as a stopgap. Basic income might be a temporary measure, but it would be a life-saving and game-changing measure, as Mr. Illen said. It's what we must.
Thank you, Kip
I'll thank the remainder of my time.
Yes, we had a momentary interruption, but I believe we heard the vast majority of your answer. If you'd like to repeat your last sentence, you may do so.
No, I believe I was finished.
All right. So we will add 20 seconds to your future speaking times. And then we proceed to Candidate Chatke. Candidate Chatke, what do you consider the best approach to achieve a universal basic income, and why is it the best approach?
Well, the universal basic income would replace certain other safety nets that we have in society. It would replace the unemployment insurance. It would replace the old age insurance program. So the first thing to do would be to use those monies for the universal basic income. Unfortunately, those monies are trivial compared to even $1,000 a month per person UBI. So I think the first step would be to do a negative income tax situation where if you are paying less than, if you are making less than $20,000 a year, then you're pushed up to $20,000 a year or something with a negative income tax. And that way, the people who really need it don't have any more paperwork to file. They already are filing income tax mostly. The people who are absolutely in poverty, all they have to do is file a 1040 EZ. And then you get at least the people who are at the bottom and need that most can get their negative income tax. And then as productivity increases and our GDP rises, then we can work on expanding that negative income tax to higher and higher levels. And you know, there's no reason to take in taxes from somebody making $1 million a year in a business and then send them back $20,000. That's just silly. It's better just not to take the money in the first place. And so I think that's the best way to achieve a universal basic income.
Thank you, Candidate Chatke. You spoke for 2 minutes, so we will add 60 seconds to your future speaking times. And now we proceed to Candidate Taylor. Candidate Taylor, what do you consider to be the best approach to achieve a universal basic income, and why is it the best approach?
I have to agree with Mr. Ben-Zion on many of his points. As we lose jobs to automation, as people need retraining because they worked in sectors lost or changed due to technological advancements, such as the energy sector or transportation, a universal basic income will provide a safety net to protect the American workforce. Furthermore, UBI allows individuals to pursue paths that were previously closed to them, such as careers in the arts. For those reasons, I propose a UBI of $2,000 per month per adult and $500 per child. UBI isn't meant to replace income from employment permanently, but to augment it and to provide a stepladder for those impacted by the changing economy, and as a supplement for those who are underemployed or who are seeking to better themselves through academic, creative, or innovative pursuits. Some of my opponents claim that UBI is too expensive, but you can visit my website at taylor2020.vision to learn how affordable it really can be. And that doesn't even include the economic growth created by UBI, as poor and middle-class Americans gain more buying power and will reinvest that in their communities. All of this can be paid for by raising taxes on the richest 10% of Americans and by closing the loopholes that allow massive corporations such as Amazon to pay little or no taxes. We cannot afford to continue in an economic system that only increases the divide between the super rich and the rest of America.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 70 seconds to your future speaking times. Thank you to all of our candidates for your answers on our universal basic income question. Now we proceed to question 9, where we begin to venture into the realm of foreign policy. Member Thomas James O'Carroll notes that Donald Trump recently announced that he would create a new branch of the military named the Space Force. And Mr. O'Carroll asks, can one nation actively declare sole dominion of space with military force? Or should military deployment in space be an international endeavor? And is it even necessary? Candidate Ben-Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. The United States or any other nation should not be asserting the kind of dominion that's described in this question in space, based on the same legal principle as respecting the neutrality of international waters, notions of this kind. But as we know, the United States has often thrown aside these protocols and behaved quite aggressively on the world stage to this day. There are concerns here in the Trump administration. I would say that in terms of this aggression, but I would say on certain measures, he's not substantively worse in foreign policy aggression than the aggregate of his predecessors, except perhaps in the trade war arena. I do feel quite strongly about space initiatives, particularly on this related subject of near-Earth development. I did a series of discussions and interviews with a Russian gentleman, and I worked with his design team. You can see those articles on the Transhumanist Party website. And we work closely on a prospectus for a partial space elevator designed to use existing materials science and technologies to create an intermediary step towards a better development and industrialization of near Earth. And this would lower the cost of fuel significantly and facilitate this moves to our outer atmosphere and the moon. This near Earth industrialization holds a great deal of promise for many new industries, and this automated design in this particular partial space elevator, it's something that I suggest you look into. There's a recent piece, I can share the link in the comments, that echoes many of these design ideas just in recent days. I've seen a mainstream media piece that I've also been sharing quite a lot. So we can be moving towards true space age civilization. And in this context, I spoke with John Carricks also yesterday in our interview. Some of you have seen that, you might recall. There's an awful lot that we would be doing by taking these bold moves to build out new markets in other areas. So it's a good step to be taking, a win-win for everyone. We could even see steps towards other things that we want as techno-futurists resulting from this. I'll bank the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Candidate Ben-Zion. We will add 32 seconds to your future speaking times. We proceed to Candidate Chacky. What are your thoughts on the Space Force and whether it is even necessary?
Well, asking can is a matter of technical ability. Asking should is a matter of ethics. Can, yes, America can assert dominion over space if they wish. We have the technical ability, we have higher technical ability than anyone else. And as anyone with any experience in warfighting would know, having the high ground means it's very difficult to make a response to the person who has the high ground. You have a lot harder time attacking high ground than defending it. Now, whether we should, that's a completely different matter. I think that the existing UN treaties on the non-militarization of space are robust, and I think that the United States is holding to those treaties that they have signed. I don't think it is appropriate to militarize space. As president, I would not do it. But as to whether it's necessary, I think that we have a world that is the most peaceful that it ever has been. And it is getting better, despite what the news says. And even Russia and China and Pakistan and India, the other nuclear nations, are working out their differences without violence for the most part. So I think that it is not necessary to have a large military presence in space, but I do believe that it is appropriate for the United States military to have a defensive posture ready to deploy into orbit, if necessary, to defend the country. And that's the remainder.
Thank you, Candidate Shatke. We will add 25 seconds to your future speaking slots. And now we proceed to Candidate Taylor. What are your thoughts on the Space Force and whether it is necessary?
Space exploration and research are definitely necessary. But I would be wary of any nation establishing military control of space, especially if done without international agreement. I would like to see more investment in space research and more international cooperation. The resources and knowledge that we'll gain, that will become available to us as we increase our reach into the cosmos, will be virtually limitless. The United States should be a leader in further developments, but not in a military capacity, except where it's necessary to defend our investments and to protect those of our allies.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 129 seconds to your future speaking times. Thank you to all candidates for answering questions. Question 10 is also on foreign policy from Mr. Thomas James O'Carroll, who observes that Donald Trump has become the first U.S. president to step across the South-North Korean border. Some say he is mending rifts, while others say he is failing at keeping peace in specific regions of the world. What would you do to improve international relations across the board with allies and previously classed adversaries? Candidate Ben-Zion, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Before I begin, if you could take a moment and you don't have to answer now, but tell me whether I have a debit or credit with you at this time in terms of remaining moments. But yes, thank you, Gennady, for that question. And thank you, Mr. Thomas O'Carroll, for these numerous thought-provoking questions. The ways in which this President Trump might be mending rifts, some of these rifts he's himself tended to agitate as much prior to mending. But it does seem to break down along oddly partisan lines transnationally. He does seem to have a kind of a strange soft spot for right-wing despots, and and having rather unusual dealings with them sometimes. But still, whatever strange or even comical business is done there, if it is done in the interest of maintaining peace on the world stage, especially given the difficulty of this imperfect power politics relationship that the United States has. We have this military-industrial complex guilty of much excess and overreach, and U.S. imperialism there. It's not an easy matter to try and unpack. And so a person who is doing their due diligence to try and maintain a peace on the world stage, I consider that to be something approaching a net positive. It's a big part of the job also to be reading these intelligence briefings, to understanding the mind of people working in state and working in these other departments. And also, I think it's important as we as techno-futurists can be bringing a lot more to the table to stabilize these fundamental relations. And these problems internationally, I do believe, are driven by economic concerns. If you remove economic instability from the equation in these states, as I believe we are doing over these decades since we have entered the networked world, and will increasingly be doing, as you remove that economic instability in those states, there is very little impetus for acting as rogue states. And these kind of interventions, these kinds of ways of being in the world, it's something that we as techno-singularitarians, or people of this kind who believe in strong techno progress, have the institutional understanding and insights into building. So we can be helping achieve greater peace on the world stage as transhumanists. I do believe that. I'll bank the remainder of my time. I'd like to have an assessment of my remaining time, if possible.
Yes, thank you. So I will add 32 seconds to your time from this segment, and in total, you now have a positive accumulation of time, 15 seconds saved up. So
very nice, thank you.
It's quite a comeback from some of the previous balances, but do know that you now have some time savings. Now we proceed to Candidate Chatke. Candidate Chatke, you have 3 minutes to discuss this question of improving international relations across the board with both allies and previously classed adversaries.
It has been stated that either goods cross borders or armies do. This is a truism. So I would remove all barriers to goods crossing borders, and I would clear out all sanctions, clear out all foreign interventions in markets, and let goods travel as freely as America can do. I would encourage our business partners and the rest of the world to do the same so that free trade can reign. The number of military bases and the ease of acting militarily that the United States has led to short-sighted and poorly thought out operations throughout the world. We are currently having active military operations, I believe, in like something like 45 countries. It's insane. I would bring the troops home. I would sell foreign bases back to the countries that they are in, and if they wish to have the material and the training to use that material, I would offer them to them. But I would bring our men home, and if they don't want to buy the material, I would bring the material home. If they wish to maintain a defensive treaty, and if they are attacked, we will have response forces. The Marines will be available, but we will not have massive forces available to use and to empire build. I would likewise disband most of our Navy, either selling it to the states or to other countries, go to a two-carrier group national fleet under the Coast Guard, where it is a defensive fleet, and then international relations will fall in place as we no longer have a posture of attack against the entire world. And that, I believe, is the best way to improve international relations.
Thank you, Candidate Shatke. We will add 15 seconds to your future speaking times. And now we proceed to Candidate Taylor. What would you do to improve international relations with both allies and previously classed adversaries?
Well, first, let me address what Donald Trump has been doing. I think it's dangerous to lend credibility to dictators and despotic regimes by meeting them without any preconditions. The North Korean government in particular is holding back its own people by preventing them from advancing in technology and in freedom. Two things we transhumanists hold dear. At the same time that he befriends these despots, Donald Trump makes decisions to alienate and push away our allies, such as the impending trade war with Germany. He has failed in international relations, despite his claims to the contrary, and we are no safer today than when he took office. I will strengthen our relationships with our allies in order to work with them for the advancement of all humanity, to solve problems that threaten the whole world, and to bring about peace around the globe. If the answers to life extension and global climate change are not found in the United States, they will most likely come from our allies, from Europe, from Australia, from Japan, from Israel. And we need to strengthen our bonds with these nations in order for the benefit of all nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 95 seconds to your future speaking slot. Now we thank all of our candidates for answering question 10, and we proceed to question 11 from member Mike DeVerde, who notes that in your first term as President of the United States, you may only have one chance at a single signature issue. What will be your main program that you spend your political capital enacting? And what current federal departments and programs, if any, will you cut to fund your signature program? Candidate Bell, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question, Mike. It's an important one, and it's a thing that I've alluded to before. I think you can probably anticipate my answer, all of you. The Futurist New Deal for America, the number one initiative therein is a middle-class basic income for every adult, age 18 to 63. And this is what we can do. We need to propel, as Andrew Yang, also a basic income candidate, says, the real economy. We need to allow people, as Matt Taylor said, to be starting the small businesses that they have wanted to start, to be doing other things that are not monetized but are still very valuable pro-social behaviors, taking care of family and loved ones, engaging in all manner of good things in the community. Right now, these things are effectively disincentivized, but we need to create a civilization that does this, and in doing so, will add many trillions of dollars to the marketplace. We will not be losing out by creating this program. And because this program is funded through this federal land lease, we will be able to fund it effectively on day one, January 21st, 2021. We will have these contracts in place with these many corporations and institutions to lease these lands. These lands are held in great number here in the United States. 85% of them are not national parks, And so we can lease them out to carbon neutral companies and institutions that are in keeping with a specific design aesthetic. They must return them as they receive them. And in doing so, we can generate $173 trillion over 10 years. And that is enough to fund this initiative and fill in some gaps in other initiatives as well. And we can do this, and we will see great benefits to having done so. There's no doubt there. I'll take a moment and talk about the other pillars of the Futurist New Deal for America. E-governance, specifically in iVoting, a blockchain secured voting allowed for in every state. Everyone has that option. And of course, using those additional trillions, we will improve our public health service, and we will build a public health service that is a longevity public health service that will be costing less, that will be drawing less from the public coffers and doing more. And we will do that by shifting, as I have said, away from this end-of-life care, away from this triage, to prevention and oversight of citizens using digitalization and personalized medicine. These are the things that we can do in a Ben Zion presidency, and it is what we will do in this position. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Zion. I will add 1 second to your future speaking times. And now we proceed to candidate Shatke. Candidate Shatke, if you only have a chance at one signature issue, what would it be? And what current federal departments and programs will you cut to fund your signature issue? I will not use the qualifier, if any, because I know that you will cut some of them, but you have 3 minutes.
I think the signature issue would be privatizing the FDA. That would be the single most effective means of furthering transhumanism and life extension for the United States. As for departments to cut, if I had the ability, I would cut them all, except the Coast Guard and other things that are specifically listed in the Constitution. As president, that would be my my vow. I would have vowed to and taken an oath to abide by the Constitution. So it would be my province to decide whether any particular program was constitutional or not, and to implement it or not. And that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you, candidate Shatke. We will add 116 seconds to your future speaking times. And now we move on to candidate Taylor. What would be your signature issue if you had to pick one? And what current federal departments and programs, if any, would you cut to fund it?
While I dream about and plan to pursue my vision for healthcare reform and for universal basic income, and we desperately need to tackle the threat of climate change, I realize that these are dreams that might not come to fruition right away because of the gridlock in Washington. Therefore, I would first direct my administration to develop a plan to invest in technological infrastructure. I have seen firsthand the difficulties that students who do not have internet access at home struggle with. They never catch up with their peers who do. Rural communities suffer because the infrastructure, the coverage just isn't there. Cell phone companies boast about covering over 90% of Americans. For most of those companies, I'm in that 10% in the dead zone. And those that do provide coverage have regional monopolies because they are the only companies in the area. This further divides America as the urban centers have greater access to education, to communication, and to business. There just isn't the economic incentive to expand coverage in rural and poorer areas. But in the 21st century, internet access is becoming a necessity and a basic human right. I would find ways to incentivize companies to invest in expansion into uncovered areas, and where necessary, develop public infrastructure to bring access to all American communities, all of which can be paid for by the reduction of military spending and the increase in corporate taxes.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 75 seconds to your future speaking times. And that concludes the responses to question 11. We proceed now to question 12 from Thomas James O'Carroll, who is curious regarding how would you approach the U.S. federal and allocate funds among the various functions of government? Would you advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall? Candidate Ben-Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, an excellent question. Another great question from Thomas O'Carroll. There are many concerns with the U.S. Federal budget and all of these matters. As I have mentioned, the Futurist New Deal, it does describe in this basic income a kind of growth, but it is a kind of growth that is funded through novel means, and so that it does not run the risk of hyperinflation. We've heard some concerns from people in the pre-show and in all of these forums about concerns of this kind destabilizing our economy. But we know that there was quantitative easing to the tune of many trillions of dollars in the wake of the 2009 financial crisis that did not significantly destabilize markets in the way that people of this kind would have predicted. It's a different kind of beast that we have, this fintech-run economy, and there is always going to be some flexibility there. And but these concerns they might arise to a high degree to a higher degree in the basic incomes described by candidate Haywire, but because the federal land dividend is funded through this novel revenue stream that we described, we don't have to worry about this quite so much in this context. There's so many other kinds of things that we could be talking about in terms of programs that we want to build. In the world of e-governance, these programs will also tend to be paying for themselves in short order. An iVoting system, we already have the digital infrastructure and the devices for almost everyone to be doing this. Many other e-services, it is much cheaper to provide these services as e-services rather than through bricks and mortar outlets at the municipal and state level. So these are good problems to be having for technofuturists. Again, all of these things in the constellation of digitalization, we can be talking about things that will, in short order, be costing pennies on the dollar, and that is will allow us to be doing more with less. The basic concept also for futurists in the concept of ephemeralization, popularized by Buckminster Fuller, to be able to do more and more with less and less, until ultimately you are able to do everything with nothing. And I do believe that we are well on track to be doing that. And people who would tend to describe worst case scenarios, the sky is falling, I think that they are being a little bit deceptive. They may not be techno-singularitarians in the fullest sense of the word. But thank you.
You're an idiot. Anyway,
Thank you, Kit. Thank you for your remarks, and you were right on time. We will proceed to candidate Shatke. How would you approach the U.S. federal budget, allocate funds among the various functions of government, and would you advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall?
well, the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform calls for the abolition of the income tax. That is $1.6 trillion in federal funds that would not be collected. That is troublesome. That means that we have to immediately cut the federal government to about 1/5 its size in order just to be working on a even keel with no additional programs. So that is a radical slash and burn idea. If we add in a UBI and we don't have some additional funding, then we are in serious financial trouble. Now, I agree that if there are government assets, that those should be immediately used to the fullest extent. But I think the existing Bureau of Land Management leasing programs are showing very little in income. And so I don't see how adding additional land to that program would add anything to the budget that would make up that huge shortfall. So the federal government things that must be done according to the Constitution are the Coast Guard, the Patent Office, the U.S. Postal Service. Very little else. The ability to raise an army, I think, should be kept. I believe that the Army, Navy, and Marines should all be brought down to a cadre level, bringing through a significant number of troops every 2 years for training, but then immediately discharging them back into the civilian population to act as part of the militia. And I believe that by doing this, we can significantly downsize the government to the point where we can abolish the income tax and still have a government that functions and not destroy the country with massive inflation, money printing like they're doing in Venezuela. So I believe that that's about the only thing that we can do in order to maintain the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform.
Thank you, Candidate Chatke. We will add 7 seconds to your future speaking times. And now we proceed to Candidate Taylor. How would you approach the U.S. federal budget and allocate funds among the various functions of government? And would you advocate growing or reducing federal spending overall?
The growing federal deficit is a real issue, and I think that needs further consideration on how to bring that amount down. I'm of the belief that we should reduce the deficit. That doesn't necessarily mean reducing spending, but we need to find new ways of increasing the governmental income. I must admit that I need to look further into Mr. Benzion's federal land dividend plan and learn more about that. Perhaps that is a direction to head. But as I've explained already, my budget would include a universal basic income for all Americans, expansion of Medicare to include a public option, and increased investment in the NIH. I'd also like to invest in technological infrastructure, as I just discussed, and increase our investment in education. These are major costs, but we can pay for them by reducing military spending, also by increasing taxes on the top 10% of income earners in America, and by closing the corporate tax loopholes. Overall, by taxing the super rich and massive corporations, we can achieve our lofty goals while still reducing that budget deficit. As we move into the future, I think that we should be investing more into extending human life than ending it. That we should be putting more into bioengineering than into bullets, and more into promoting education than into propping up giant corporations.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. We will add 62 seconds to your future speaking times. And before we proceed to question 13, I will note that we are now at the stage where there will be no further positive time accumulation, because for question 13, each candidate will have an additional 2 minutes, but consider essentially budgeting your time, because you will need to allocate that time between that question and then your subsequent open remarks or closing remarks, however you would wish to construe those. So I will give you an understanding of where you stand in terms of time, including the 120 seconds that would be added for question 13. Candidate Benzayan, you would have 136 seconds. Candidate Shatke, you would have 718 seconds. And candidate Taylor, you would have 1,006 seconds. So be mindful of that time. And as I've stated, we will go through the rotation until each candidate either exhausts his time or essentially yields the remainder of his time. So question 13 comes from Denora Delphine, our Director of Admissions and Public Relations, who asks, what are the transhumanist movements and the U.S. Transhumanist Party's greatest challenges preventing growth? So focus your answers on both the transhumanist movement generally and the U.S. Transhumanist Party in particular. Candidate Benzayan, you have the floor.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. This is an interesting question and not an easy one to answer. As I've mentioned in other discussions, one of my campaign promises is that I will grow this organization to 10,000 members by 2022, and be growing this organization and building this organization in other ways besides. And there's some impediments to this, but it's a good work that we can do in raising awareness for life extension and other positive techno-optimist outcomes. And some people look at the diversity of political opinions in this organization, and they might describe it as something that is preventing growth. I don't feel that way. I think that we have to have this kind of robust discussion that we're seeing on this panel, and I welcome it. We should be open to accommodating all political philosophies. And as I mentioned already, the Futurist New Deal was devised as a sort of concession to this reality. And I think that as a candidate for president for the United States Transhumanist Party, I will be able to continue to be doing outreach to diverse organizations and professional individuals through the podcast and other media, and overcoming these hurdles to growth. We've been able to do an awful lot in this short time with raising awareness for these so important issues, particularly life extension. And I do feel that that is the good work that we can be doing in this community. The Futurist New Deal for America, it is the best way forward for this organization. Be aware, the radical life extension is closer than you think. So plan accordingly. I'll bank the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Thank you, candidate Benzayan. So you spoke for 116 seconds, which will leave you 20 seconds for concluding remarks when it is time. And now we proceed to candidate Shatke. What are your thoughts on the transhumanist movements and the U.S. Transhumanist Party's greatest challenges that are preventing growth?
The transhumanist movement is unknown. It's a fringe group that's basically been very cliquish in its activities and barely making us a blip on the world stage. So I think the first thing is a general advertising campaign to let the people of the world know that transhumanism is a thing and is an actual sane concept that's not just something bandied about by rich people taking stem cell treatments in Puerto Vallarta. So I think that basic level of I yield my time.
All right. Candidate Shatke, you spoke for 84 seconds. And now we proceed to Candidate Taylor. What are your thoughts on this question of the transhumanist movements and the U.S. Transhumanist Party's greatest challenges preventing growth?
Well, recent controversies on the use of the term transhumanism aside, the Transhumanist Party faces an uphill battle against public ignorance and even fear. Fear of technology, fear of the future, and fear of the unknown. If we choose candidates that won't be taken seriously by the American public, or if we continue to only focus on posing lofty philosophical thought problems rather than solving real-world problems, we won't break through into the greater collective consciousness in a positive way. Transhumanism needs strong, positive branding and a collection of ambassadors to spread the message about how the ideals of the movement represent a bright future for the entire world. And I encourage the members of the U.S. Transhumanist Party to think about how they can be those ambassadors to the greater community. I think this is our chance for the Transhumanist Party to break out into the public eye and into traditional and new media outlets. I think this is the dawning of a new era for transhumanism. And I encourage the membership of the U.S. Transhumanist Party to carefully consider and carefully choose the face of the USTP to best promote the image of transhumanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. You spoke for 103 seconds. So now we proceed to the open forum stage of the debate. First, we have candidate Benzion, who has 20 seconds remaining. So these would be your concluding remarks, but what can you tell our viewers in 20 seconds?
Yes, I could tell you simply this. Vote for me, Benzion 2020, in the upcoming primary, and support the Futurist New Deal for America, the most well thought out of these platforms. We're doing the good work that these other candidates haven't had the time to do, perhaps, and we have by far the best platform. Please vote for Benzion 2020 in this primary. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Benzion. We appreciate your participation in this debate, and we certainly encourage all of our viewers to look into the Futurist New Deal podcast. You have done some tremendous work with your interviews with various transhumanist and non-transhumanist, but nonetheless important thinkers. So most definitely, we greatly appreciate your running in this race and all of your insights in the debate today. Now, we still have candidates Shatke and Taylor with significant amounts of time accumulated. Candidate Shatke, you have 634 seconds, and candidate Taylor, you have 903 seconds. So we can essentially rotate between the two of you, and you can offer any remarks you wish on ideas that were covered in this debate thus far, or your policy suggestions that you feel have not sufficiently been covered yet, you may respond to what other candidates have stated, you may respond to one another, but we will essentially proceed between the two of you. Each of you will still have the floor completely while you're speaking, but it is up to you what you will make of this opportunity. So candidate Checky, you have the floor.
Thank you. Fellow members of the Transhumanist Party, I must admit that I did not know about your party until June. And since then, I've tried to be active in getting to know the party and the people in it, and getting to understand your goals. And I wholeheartedly embraced the party as completely in line with my longstanding beliefs as a futurist, as a science fiction author, as a science fiction fan. And I have focused my life on doing what I can in order to improve the situation for the world and in order to bring about the future that I think humanity can reach. And I think that the United States is the hotbed of innovation, and I think freedom is the way to make that innovation happen. And I think anyone telling you, oh yes, we can do this, we can give you this and this and this and this, who doesn't have a grasp of the scale of the problem from the get-go is a snake oil salesman, and you shouldn't trust him any further than you can throw him. And with that, I will let Mr. Taylor have some remarks.
Thank you, candidate Checky. You spoke for 113 seconds, and now we proceed to candidate Taylor. You have the floor.
The benefits of not being as long-winded as Mr. Ben Zion, that we have all this time to speak and push forward our ideas and agenda. America stands on the precipice of a new age, and we can either embrace the change and soar into a brighter future, or we can continue on the path we are on towards despair. Our similarities within transhumanism and our similarities to the greater public should unite us more than our differences divide us. And we can find common ground in the pursuit of the advancement and improvement of human life through technology, science, and medicine. My new vision will show the way towards the future we need, and we can achieve it by bringing our ideas to a greater audience. This is our opportunity to do just that. I encourage our audience here to read all about my platform at taylor2020.vision or on my Facebook page at fb.me/TaylorForAmerica. And I'd like to encourage anyone watching who isn't yet a member of the USTP, but who liked what they heard tonight from any of the candidates, to join the USTP at transhumanist-party.org/membership by Saturday, so that they can vote in the party primary. Furthermore, I'd like to thank Gennady again for moderating this debate. I'd like to thank Steele for providing the U.S. Transhumanist Party with this great platform to spread the good word. And I'd like to thank my fellow candidates for a well-reasoned and civil debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. You spoke for 124 seconds, and I greatly appreciate your good words and your remarks concerning membership registration. Once again, that link is Transhumanist-Party membership. So anyone watching this who isn't a member yet, please go to the US Transhumanist Party website and register for free membership. So now we come again to candidate chat key. You still have 521 seconds if you choose to use them. You have the floor.
Thank you. I think we have seen a political ploy by Ben Zion in this debate, in which he didn't actually answer the first couple of questions, but just used it to put forth his platform, futurist New Deal, snake oil again and again. And so that's, you know, he got his licks in early, figuring that people wouldn't watch the entire stream. He's counting on stupidity. I am not going to insult people who are futurists by misusing the time and not answering questions. I think that people who are in the Transhumanist Party have come here because they thought about the future. I think we have differences in how we approach it. I think a lot of people have been taken in by luxury techno-communism. And that's a dangerous place to be. There's a lot of, especially youth, who have been sold snake oil their entire lives because they have never dealt with anybody in the private sector except the companies who are charging them for the things they want. And they don't understand where wealth comes from and where things actually happen. Government has no money. Government only has things it has taken from its people. It does not make a pie bigger to take half the piece from one person and give it to another, or give slivers of it to two other people and keep a sliver of it yourself. That does not make a nation wealthier. What makes a nation wealthier is baking another pie and giving that to the other people and letting those people have pieces of pie that nobody else had before that. That is why America grew by leaps and bounds in the 19th century. We kept expanding our pie. We expanded in the 19th century from 13 colonies across the entirety of a continent. I believe America can expand from one continent across the entirety of a solar system. And I believe that only the futurist party of the Transhumanist Party can manage that and can lead America and the world to that. So I think that's all I need to say right now.
Chairman, I believe you're muted.
Yes. Oh, my apologies. Thank you, candidate Shatke. You spoke for 213 seconds. To candidate Taylor, who still has 779 seconds remaining. Candidate Taylor, you may begin.
I really thought, since talking is my living in a lot of ways, that I'd be the one running out of time. But I just wanted to make a little remark. Mr. Shatke says that taking away some of the pie from one person and giving it to another does not make the pie bigger. That's true, but we have a system right now in which a few individuals have taken all the pie, and it's important that we let that pie be spread out among the whole party, the whole group that has gathered.
Yes, government is evil.
I think when we take a look at the hoarding of wealth among the super rich, among corporations that pay essentially no taxes, we find that we can indeed spread that around. And I think it's important as we move into a futurist economy, one that is driven by automation and driven by advances that actually take away the jobs of many Americans, myself included. I think education is going the way of being a service provided mostly online. And while I don't think that's necessarily the direction it should take, I think that's the direction it is taking. And perhaps soon enough will be taken by AI. Even computer programming, thought to be one of the bastions of computers will never be able to program themselves, is becoming more and more automated. So as these jobs get taken away, if we don't have a way of distributing that wealth, then people are going to be in dire straits. And really, as we advance in technology and people need to work less and less, we should be getting more and more freedom and more liberty and more leisure time, and time to pursue creative endeavors or innovation, the parts that are part and parcel to human nature. Right now, it's AI is very good at certain things, while humans are good at creativity and good at innovating and good at thinking outside the box. And the more we can open up opportunities for people to do just that, the better. And I think that the universal basic income, for instance, will do just that. And I would inform Mr. Shatke that if the Constitution and in its rawest form is so important to him, that perhaps he should look into the Constitution Party.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. You spoke for 225 seconds. So now we return again to candidate Shatke, who has 308 seconds remaining if he wishes to use them. Candidate Shatke, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think at this point, the thing that needs to be said is we are transhumanists. We believe that humanity can rise above the limits of flesh and blood, that we can expand the realm of mind past just humans born of woman into humans born of silicon, into humans born of ape or dolphin or elephant or whatever other animal that can be brought to full sentience. I think that we can expand the place of intelligence in the universe beyond the limits that we have today, and that we can bring humanity and sapience to the universe. not only to our solar system, but the technology exists today to make an interstellar voyage. And it's not going to happen overnight. It won't be an 80-year trip. It will be a hundreds of years trip if we did it with today's technology. But I think that it's time humanity left the cradle, that humanity left the nursery, and that we accept that humanity is not limited to man born of women. And those ideals of treating all sentience properly, of bringing as much thought into the universe as possible and letting it express itself as freely as possible, as long as it doesn't interfere with other sentience. I believe that those are the ideals that this party is striving for, and I think everybody in this party is trying hard to fulfill those ideals. I do not think Ben Zion is an evil man bent on world domination. I don't think anyone in this party is. I don't think anyone in the transhumanist movement is. And so whenever the party selects a presidential candidate, I will work with what I have available to make that presidential candidate successful. And I hope that all the other presidential candidates and all of the other members of the party agree with that sentiment, that this is the place where people are expanding the very definition of people and making those people as effective for as long as possible as they can be. And I thank you for taking the time to listen to my thoughts on the matter. And I bid you all peace and joy as you go about your days.
Thank you, Candidate Shatke. You spoke for 4 minutes and 4 seconds. So that then means that if you do choose to speak further, you will have 64 seconds to do so. But in the meantime, we proceed to Candidate Taylor. Candidate Taylor, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think Mr. Shatke said something very important there, and it may be the point on which we agree the most, which is that we, as humans, can rise above our base natures, and that's what transhumanism is about at its core. And so I appreciate this forum. I appreciate my chance to spread my view, my vision for transhumanism and for the nation. And thank you all once again.
Thank you, Candidate Taylor. You spoke for 38 seconds. And now I will ask Candidate Shatke, do you wish to utilize any of your remaining 64 seconds?
I think we're pretty much done here. I think we've covered the ground, and it's time to put this to bed. Peace and joy, and get some sleep.
Well, so thanks, and I saw agreement from Candidate Taylor. We will conclude tonight's debate. Thank you to candidates Ben Zion, Shatke, and Taylor for your spirited participation. We discussed many areas of policy. We were able to discuss areas of disagreement civilly. We were able to focus also on what unites us as transhumanists. I am pleased to have all three of you in this race. Despite the technical difficulties, we made this a good debate. We made this a debate that our audience enjoyed. we had as many viewers on the second live stream as on the first. For those of you who are curious as to what happened to interfere with the first live stream, it seems that some technician tripped over a cable that connected to Steele Archer's router. It was essentially, I believe, a cleanup person who did this, so quite an unexpected incident, but a non-repeatable incident, thankfully, and we appreciate everyone for bearing with us. Please keep in mind, you have
And
until...
people want to internet connect to all of their medical devices.
Sadly, we still have quite a way to go to ensure the robustness of our technological infrastructure in order to implement many of the transhumanist projects. So anyone who has ideas about how to improve that, we are definitely quite eager to hear them. But for those of you who haven't registered yet for free membership in the U.S. Transhumanist Party, I once again remind you, register by September 21st to be eligible to vote in our electronic ranked preference primary. If you liked what you heard today from any of the candidates, you don't have to vote for just one. You can rank order the candidates. You can rank order all of the candidates. So if you like something from multiple candidates, you would be able to display that preference as well. So thank you very much, all viewers. Thank you to all of our candidates. Thank you to Steele Archer for your excellent work behind the scenes in co-hosting this debate. Thank you to Lev and Jules once again for your pre-debate commentary. We hope you stick around for the post-debate show as well. And I bid you all good night.
Hey, Matt Taylor, do you want to come on the post-debate show?
Sure.
All right, cool. We'll see you there.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. All right, I'll see you there. All right, everybody, how was that? That was a good debate, wasn't it? Did you enjoy that?
Hey guys,
Hey,
I'm
Mr.
in for the band. Oh my god, they just took it.
We got this.
Let's fix my camera.
This.
All right, everybody, hang around. We're getting some people in now. I might just whack on some music while because it's boring. But let's get this sorted out. How did you guys enjoy the debate? I'm reading the comments. Did you really like those debates? Did you like the debates before? What did you think of the candidates? They were quite different, right? Matt Taylor, we hadn't seen him very much. He's a very good deep thinker, inspirational thinker. Yeah, he's a very inspirational voice. I liked him a lot. You know, big government guy though. He's slippery. I mean, if you enjoy the big government thing, let me get some people in. Let me get Lev and Jules back.
Hi there.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Post debate.
Hey, I'm here. Yep, let me fix my camera.
Alright, so we got Matt back. Nice to see you here, Matt.
you see me? Hey, that was a great show. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, is Lev coming or is Lev gone?
Lev has a very early morning, and so he will not be joining us again. So this is half of Lev and Jules. Everyone make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Absolutely.
Lev and Jules break the rules.
Welcome, Matt. Welcome back post debate. We want to get you because we want to give you some more airtime. How did you find the debate? How did you go? You faced Shatki and Ben Zion, both sort of. What do you think? Ben's more ideologically aligned to you. Shatki, not so much.
Yeah. I found I agreed more with Ben Zion than I thought I would. I really thought going into this that we'd differ on a lot of important points. So it's interesting that way. And with Mr. Shakti, I think that I deferred more than I thought I would. So an interesting debate. I thought it was well reasoned on all sides.
Absolutely, it was a good solid debate. Well, your concern, you bring up something. You say you don't like profit because the profit incentive. Why don't you like the profit incentive? What do you find that's wrong with the profit incentive?
I wouldn't exactly say that, but I think that it's important that we that we're careful about things like tax breaks for corporations and using that system, using ideas like that to promote goals of the government. I just worry that when profit is the number one thing, of course it is for a corporation. That's their job, is to make money for their shareholders. That if that's the main focus, then I worry that things like, as Mr. Shakti said, making making most medical research profit driven by making it privatized. We've seen that fail in the past as these corporations bid up the price of life-saving medicines.
Okay, so is it a failure of the corporation and the mechanism within, or is it a failure of government? Which one is it? Or because a lot of the capitalists, they complain about cronyism, and a lot of the Bernie bros complain about cronyism. Do you agree with that? It's just cronyism. You don't like government and corporate, sort of getting in bed with each other and working with each other, or is it that there's actually something wrong with the capitalist profit incentive model? I'm not sure which one do you line up with more?
Well, a problem with the profit incentive, with the way our government is set up, is the biggest capitalists are also the biggest, you could call them communists, you could call them government supremacists, because they can pay for lobbyists to pass laws in their favor. Like Google and Amazon and Netflix and Facebook were all the biggest advocates for net neutrality. And that should always give people pause, right? We should be skeptical of everyone. We should be skeptical of me. We should be skeptical of Matt. We should be skeptical of Google, Amazon, Facebook. We should be skeptical of the underdogs and the people with the high ground, you name it. The problem is the most powerful constituents use government to pass laws in their favor. Our healthcare system is artificially expensive because people corner the market. Martin Shkreli raised the price on his life-saving drug to $750, and students at MIT replicated the drug for $2, and government prohibited them from introducing this molecularly identical drug into the market because of bureaucrats. Rationalize it any way you want, but it wasn't a lack of tax dollars that made it impossible to crush the price. The problem is, if you think that there's a finite pie and and you think about money as a zero-sum game, and so if this person has $10, that means someone else can't have that $10. And it's all about, how do we redistribute this limited amount of money? You are misunderstanding the nature of the system, right? The focus should be on value, and the focus should be on crushing prices in the market. So if you see a drug is $750, we shouldn't be thinking about how to raise taxes to subsidize the $750 drug, which is what drove the drug to that price in the first place. The focus should be on, how do we crush that price by enabling the competition of the MIT students who made the same drug for $2, who aren't allowed to introduce the drug into the market because bureaucrats said so.
All right, hang on. So Matt, I just want to get down to the crux of what you think. So
the big capitalists, Matt, I'm sorry, the big capitalists will manipulate you. The big capitalists will manipulate you to make you think that it's a tax problem, because they'll use those taxes to make an insider class, and you won't get it.
Hang on, so Mr. Taylor, can you respond to that?
Create a Venezuela.
Hang on, Jules.
You'll
hang on,
create
Jules.
another Venezuela.
Calm down.
I
Calm down.
think, I think Jules is making some good points there.
Absolutely.
Particularly when we treat money as speech, and say that a political investment is the same, covered under the same freedom as freedom of speech and voicing an opinion. And we allow corporations to fund these super PACs that overfund.
Yeah, but hang on, you've missed the crux of my point. You've both gone way off the crux.
I'm getting there. I'm
right.
coming around to it.
All right.
I do think it mostly is cronyism, as a lot of politicians have gotten, in bed, so to speak, with these corporations and allow them to make the rules. I've seen that directly in my state, as a lot of the as our state legislature pushed forward charter school legislation recently. And that legislation wasn't written by our legislators. It was written by these corporations from out of state that were going to make money by opening charter schools in our state. So the same thing is true in healthcare. These corporations, they aren't failing as corporations. Their job is to make as much money as possible. But we're failing because we're allowing them to govern us in a way. Corporations should be working for the people.
My question was basically a systems analysis, okay, Mr. Matt Taylor. And what I want to know is there a systems function problem with the profit incentive? Do you see that inevitably through capitalism you will always end up with cronyism, regardless of examples of the United States, because the United States is one capitalist system, a mixed economy, whatever you want to call it, in a kind of a myriad of examples. There are a lot of these systems. Is there a structural issue with the profit incentive? That's my main question.
I think in an unfettered capitalist society, yes. I think that it's necessary that some constraints be placed upon corporations to prevent this.
Mr. Shatke, same question.
Is there problems on corporations is by passing an economic amendment that prohibits government from passing laws that manipulate the economy. Because as long as government is able to pass laws to manipulate the economy, they will always pass the laws for the people with the money.
But democracy is supposed to diffuse that power. That's the point of a democracy, right?
If you take the government's power away to pass laws in favor of the people with the most money, you just say, government, you're not allowed to manipulate the economy anymore. Then you equalize it. But as long as the government is allowed to pick and choose winners and losers, if they're allowed to pass a law to help one and hurt five, that's immoral. And that's what they're allowed to do. You mentioned that you're against charter schools, so you just think we should have more public education. The public education system is failing, right? And we keep putting more and more money into it, and education keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It's not a money problem. That's the system's problem. The lack of the profit incentive is a systems problem. And there's not a finite amount of wealth, right? You should be focusing on how to get $1 to buy 10 times more than how to get $10 more if you want to defeat aging, because it is a massive problem. There are people with lots of money that would love to pour money into it without ruining themselves, without ever having a chance of getting the therapies, right? You know, it's illegal. Like if I wanted to go out and start feeding homeless people, it's illegal for me to do that. I understand some of these rules are supposed to be precautions to, like, you know, like that's the point of government, right? That's the point of the precautionary principle. But it's come to the point of recklessness, right? We don't want to be reckless optimists. We want to be optimists that can foresee potential problems. And the big potential problem here is we are not accelerating innovation. And it's because a lot of people also have a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of money and how the economy works. And they think it's a bunch of rich people need to be taxed more. And that's just not how it works. And I am like a hillbilly compared to ultra rich people here. Like we're all on the same team here, right? We want this stuff. We don't want an elite insider class, but we want to speed this stuff up. And you have to look at the Martin Shkreli as a case study. The fact that he raised his drug to $750, you have MIT students that made the same drug for $2. You need to think about that in terms of scale. All right. The fact that these people can't introduce the drug into the market is killing you.
You keep bringing this one up, this Martin Shkreli thing. Shatki, respond to Martin Shkreli. What do you think about that?
Well, with no FDA, what would stop the other person from marketing the drug? Nothing. There are patents, right? But those are 20-year. They're limited in time. That effectively puts every drug into generics after 20 years. And also, if without the FDA, if you can make something that is synthesized and does the same job, you can sell it. And if if it's not yet approved by the voluntary FDA, well then people can decide whether it's close enough to the other drug or not to trust.
The problem, Mr. Shatki, is that 3 years ago I was placed on a drug by my doctor for asthma. At the time I didn't have asthma, I had another breathing problem, but it was thought to help my breathing problem. That drug had terrible mental, depressive side effects, and I experienced those side effects. Those side effects are not on the warning label.
How did they get through? How did they get through?
And the FDA failed.
With those
but a privatized FDA or a non-existent, a voluntary FDA is not going to make sure this stuff is safe.
Well, the forceful FDA didn't keep it from happening. So why do you think that keeping the forceful FDA is going to keep it from happening? If a bad actor does that to you, then you sue them.
Check it for you. You'd be better off having charitable autists looking out for you than the FDA.
Well,
you'd be better off
possible for individuals to file these complaints for this to get put on the label.
I swear it.
Sorry, Matt Taylor, go on.
I just think that we need to make a system whereby the complaints about the drug can be heard, because shortly thereafter,
complaints are heard. There is a website that goes over every drug with a fine-tooth comb, and it tells you ahead of time which drugs the FDA is going to unapprove, and it's going to say these are going to have to be taken off the market, because they know 20 years before the FDA tells them that they're dangerous.
Of a group of parents whose children had taken this drug and led to the suicide of many of those children. And yet the drug,
absolutely
despite
horrible
complaints,
I agree. Government is bad in this state. Government is very bad.
But,
I agree with you there. Having a government FDA protecting these people from lawsuits is a very bad thing. Those people who suicided, whose children were driven to suicide by the drug, should have been able to sue that company and take their money and get some recompense.
I'll tell you what. Like if it's like China, right? Because Mr. Taylor, you're a big government person. This is okay, but you know, like China, everything is state backed. So if you want to attack a state funded company in China, you have to take on the government every single time. There is no private company. Right, so it's like it's you versus the Chinese state at whatever level. If you want to take on roads, if you want to take on drugs, if you want to take on agriculture, if you want to take on any way you go, even though they have these front organizations, the banks or whatever they are, they're always backed up by the CCP and the Chinese government at large. So it's you versus the whole Chinese state on all these little issues. Do you think that that's a problem, that the individual loses power in that system?
Yeah, I do think
any government which can give you everything can take everything away.
I think that we need to find a balance between individual rights and the controls that need to be placed upon these corporations so that they can, so that the people are protected. You know, we don't need to be protecting corporations.
I agree with that. If there's no market for them, they should disappear.
The government is what protects the corporations.
If you the FDA
tell the government it has to be a referee instead of an active player, you will take the corporation's monopoly away. The monopolies will be, and they are, but they will be apocryphal. It's the governments protect the corporations. And if you think it's just that we haven't passed the right laws yet, I'm sorry, you're not paying attention. And I know you want this stuff.
In fact, the United States government was designed and produced and made effective in order to protect the corporations. That is what Hamilton immediately built out of the Constitution. And he said, the Constitution is just a document that we're going to interpret along the way in order to get what we want, which is the corporatism. And that was straight out from the beginning, from day one of the Constitution. Okay?
Yeah, but that wasn't the plan of all of us.
Yes, it was! It was absolutely the plan.
Read about Washington.
The Articles of Confederation didn't allow a unified state to make players.
He was a big New York capitalist. Farmers in Virginia didn't want that.
Yes, they did. The farmers in Virginia wanted money for their tobacco farms exports. The farmers, the people in New York wanted protection against people and you know, funding for their capital expenditures to build more stuff. Everybody was trying to get in on the action, and that is why they created the federal government. It was designed and created in order to make a corporatocracy.
We regulated trains, and we did not foresee the innovations of trucks. And then the railroad owners said, hey, you've handicapped us unfairly. Now you need to regulate the trucks. So then we made the trucks more inefficient by giving them these arbitrary routes, saying, okay, well, you guys can do this way too efficiently now, and that's way too unfair to the railroads, and you're going to put the railroads out of business. And we've already regulated them to make them more inefficient for fairness somehow. So now let's regulate the trucks so that they can be on the same level as the railroads that we regulated. And that didn't foresee airplanes, right?
Yeah,
now the airplanes
unforeseen
could
consequences.
transport faster than the trucks. And then the trucks were like, what the heck? You just regulated us, and now we can't even economically compete with the airplanes. And so we said, okay, well, we'll regulate the airplanes so that they can be competitive with the trucks. And it's like, can anybody understand this madness?
Rather than just free everybody and say, hey, do whatever you want, you're not going to give any to anybody.
I don't see why that regulation isn't.
It's not a tax problem. It's not a tax problem. It's an economy of
It's a
scale problem.
redistribution of wealth problem.
It's not.
Matt,
You're
no,
wrong.
it's not.
It's a generation of wealth problem. It's not a redistribution of wealth problem. It's a generation of wealth problem.
Okay,
Money.
Matt,
Okay.
Matt,
Redistribution does generate wealth.
One at a time, please. One at a time.
Classes.
Money
Sorry, Matt,
is credit that
Jules,
represents
finish
human
your
value.
Jules,
If you
may I?
put more value into the system, your money can be worth more.
All right, Mr. Shatke.
The economy is not a finite pie. It's a bubble that inflates and deflates. We print the money, dude. We print the money. What do you? It's all. What's your economic theory? This is all just imaginary land to you.
All right, Matt Taylor or Mr. Shatke, who wants to go first?
okay. Today, it takes roughly an hour of minimum wage work to buy enough food to eat. Okay, for that day. Less if you want to go rice and beans. But an hour of work at minimum wage, even with government taxation, you still bring home $5, and that'll buy you a pound of ground beef or a jar of peanut butter and a loaf of bread. Why is that so cheap? Well, it's so cheap because there's massive competition in producing foodstuffs. It's so cheap because there's a lot of players. When we have a problem with price, there are two things going on. The laws of supply and demand are not unclear. If you raise the supply, the price goes down if the demand stays the same. If you raise the demand, the price goes up if the supply stays the same. In order to attract more supply, you want to have high prices because then people will enter the market and spend the capital to bring stuff to market. If you want to raise the demand, you subsidize people buying it. So healthcare is an example of exactly the wrong incentives being applied to a situation. We are curtailing demand with the AMA, medical licensing, limiting hospital building, limiting clinic building based upon need decided by the people already doing medical services in that area, the AMA. They are the ones sitting on the board deciding whether they need another hospital. And then, so we limit the supply, and then we also subsidize the demand and make it third party, where people aren't feeling the pain of the price of a procedure and aren't saying to the doctor, well, how much does a PET scan cost versus a CAT scan, and does that cost-benefit difference worth it? I mean, I'm just getting, we're just seeing if there's any cancer at all at this point, right? Well, the doctor wants the most detailed scan as possible. And if he's going to justify it to a company, a third-party payer, he's going to want to say, well, we chose this because it's the most detailed scan possible, and that way we get the best results, and we know for sure. Whereas, maybe the doctor would normally say, well, you're already suffering the symptoms, so we know you have cancer. I can feel the lump. We just need to know how big that lump is. A CAT scan would do fine. Well, he doesn't, because he could get sued if the PET scan is available and he decides on the CAT scan, right?
This is tort reform.
So, yeah, tort reform is a part and parcel of getting the healthcare expenses under control. But it's not the whole thing. We've got to take care of the supply and increase the supply. We've got to take care of the demand and decrease the unnecessary demand. Okay.
All right. Yeah, Matt Taylor, what's your idea for healthcare, for example, with bringing prices down? And what's your main concern in the healthcare field? What's your idea, firstly, and then what's your main concern, and how would you fix it?
I think that a public option helps lower costs, and that use of technology to make the system more efficient helps lower costs. I think that allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices would lower costs. So that's as far as lowering cost and making it more affordable, that would be the way to do it.
They'll pick a single supplier.
Jules,
There'll be a single supplier. They'll negotiate the price with the single supplier. They'll have one supplier of the drug, and then the government will just say, please just lower it.
Right now, they aren't allowed to negotiate that. They aren't even allowed to pick different suppliers. So giving them that freedom that the insurance companies have would definitely make things more affordable for the greatest number of people. I was subject to an insurance company that worried more about its bottom line than it did about me. And throughout the appeal process, it didn't help. But a publicly run system doesn't need to worry about that as much.
But what I'm trying to work out with you, Mr. Taylor, is it really that this corporation is concerned with its bottom line and not about you? Or is it the corporation and the government in cahoots worried about their power over you? Because these corporations don't exist in isolation, which is what you're kind of implying, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, isn't it? I think that focus on profit removes the care about humanity. And I think that because these corporations effectively buy politicians by buying lobbyists and funding super PACs, that then they get laws passed that benefit them.
So
Matt,
your idea is if you remove the corporate side and only have the government side, then it's a public institution, it's a public trust. Is that what you're saying? So there can't be corruption, and there can't be price manipulation, and there can't be all these other things, because it's now a
because
utility.
There's oversight. There's public oversight. I mean, I think we're headed that way. Now, not right away, and I don't think that should be our goal necessarily. I think that if you provide an affordable public option, that people will have the choice to migrate to that system or not. And I think that the public option will become the best option for a lot of people. So therefore, they're going to move to that.
The Soviet Union went to the extreme on this, okay? They nationalized everything. It was all publicly owned, right? And then at the end of it, once it all fell over, it all got sold off to all these oligarchs who now run the whole place, and the mafia runs everything. Wouldn't you just end up going down the same path as the Soviet Union? You'd nationalize it, you'd create price distortions, and then at the end of it, when you have nobody else to rob, it all just gets sold off in a big massive wasteland of decay.
No, I'm not calling for the nationalization across the board. I'm calling for a public option for healthcare that would be more affordable and better in a lot of cases than private insurance. But if you have private insurance that is serving you well,
Medicare is a disaster.
If you do that through voluntary charity, if you crush the prices, more charities will do it. If you're on an airplane and there's a problem and the masks come down, they tell you to put the mask on yourself first. And that's not because they're telling you to not care about the people around you. And the profit motive is not about stripping humanity away and being compassionless and not caring about others. It means avoiding ruin. And you should want to avoid ruin as much as you would want your community and country to avoid ruin, because you're a part of something larger than yourself, and that's your community and your country. And the profit motive is what keeps all of that stable and thriving even. If you want things to be accelerating, you want people focusing on profit. Because if people focus on profit, that means they're focusing on creating more value. And money is just credit that represents human value, right? Money is not this figment that we print. And if it's just a redistribution problem, we can just print more money, right? The problem is you can print all the money you want and you wouldn't be creating more value. But if you create a lot more value, suddenly the money can buy more with it. So you should be focusing on how do we create the value of realizing radical life extension therapies. And then if you want to focus on having a public option, that public option should be provided by voluntarists and charitable contributions, okay? If you crush the prices low enough, believe me, people will provide those therapies because they won't want you to storm the castle, right? There's more people than there are elites. You could drown the elites in your own urine if everybody got together, right? If you have a bunch of velociraptors see like a 0.0001% of people getting something, like that's a powder cake situation. If you crush the prices, you make it possible for the Jeff Bezoses and the Googles and the people you don't even know about to just say, hey, it's now no longer illegal for me to just feed people on the streets. Why would I even want to deal with the bureaucratic headache? There's already a soup kitchen.
Jules, this is a good question.
I absolve myself of guilt, and then people become indifferent and passive and apathetic.
This is a good question Matt's got here. How do you ensure that people fund charities?
You can't ensure anything voluntary, of course, but you can incentivize. I have a plan where the federal government would handle the building of a homeless shelter and feeding kitchen, Salvation Army style, as soon as the local community had funded a trust fund to make that a viable operation. And so as soon as, the people in San Francisco get together who knows, maybe it's $500,000 to get a minimum wage worker to cook the meals 3 times a day. Who knows? Whatever it costs. Whatever that cost is, they present the business plan to the department. The department would say, great, looks like you've got it together. And they go in and they seize an empty piece of land and pay the owner for it and build the building for them to use for this soup kitchen. And by doing it that way, the federal government overrides all the local building codes, which would keep it from happening. The federal government overrides all the complaints and takes on all the complaints on themselves. And then it gets built in a short order instead of being drawn out with court cases for 5 years because somebody doesn't want it in their backyard. And so that's how you get that situation.
All right, Matt, you've got a UBI
now we have the federal government taking away people's private property?
It's done all the time.
And it shouldn't be.
Matt Taylor, you have a UBI
plan?
From
a pure libertarian standpoint, you're right. But from a federal government standpoint and from what's in the Constitution, it is perfectly allowed.
Matt Taylor, you have a UBI plan. What's your UBI plan? It's $2,000, right, a month?
$2,000 per adult per month and $500 per child per month.
And how did you come to that conclusion? Why do you think that's important?
That's an amount that would be a livable wage in certain areas of the country, not of course in every area, but would provide the necessary boost for people to be able to pursue entrepreneurial ends or to reinvest in their community. It would also be more than enough for them to pay for their coverage through the public option that I mentioned earlier.
Jules, did he win you over?
I love Yang Gang. Yang Gang. I want $1,000 a month. I want $2,000 a month. How am I going to argue against getting $2,000?
Well, I know you were skeptical a day ago, weren't you? So you've won him over, Matt.
I think that's problematic. I think if you're going to propose a universal basic income, you have to get rid of all other forms of welfare. Like you got to get rid of NASA, and you got to get rid of the education, like the Department of Education. You gotta get rid of like a lot. You gotta get rid of everything.
I was following you
and then you can have the UBI, and you can maintain the courts and the police and the national defense. You privatize the hospitals. You even privatize the fire departments, right? And then and you let Pornhub pave our roads. And then you have Pornhub advertisements all over the place. And then you can have a UBI, which would just be a more direct form of redistribution. And then that's how you could actually make that work in an optimal situation.
Matt, you had a response?
I mean, I was following you there for a little bit, Jules. You do get rid of a lot of the welfare system. You get rid of welfare. You get rid of Social Security because you don't need those anymore with the universal basic income. But that doesn't mean that you get rid of the basic services that our human needs, such as education. We need that education so that we can have computer programmers to bring us the technology that we know and love. And people in rural communities like mine are not going to be able to get that in a provided privately.
There was an Indian scholar and academic, an education specialist. This was a TED Talks called "Build the School in the Clouds," and he wanted to write a proposal for why he needed more money for teachers. So he took a computer in English and put it in a slum. And he expected to come back 2 weeks later and say, hey, look, I gave these kids the resources and nothing happened. This is why we need money for teachers. And he came back And the kids in the slum were speaking English. And they went to him and said, we need a faster processor. And he was like, what? What? How did that happen? So then he did it again. And he kept running this experiment again and again. He would take different computers and put them in slums with no adult supervision. And he would go back every time, and the kids would learn English, and they would recite everything, the content of the computer, to the point when one time he put in neuroscience on it, just to like try to completely overwhelm them. He was like, did you understand anything? And they're like, no, we don't understand anything. All we know is that the synapses like transmits information from one side to the other. And it was remarkable. And then he realized that he didn't need money for teachers, that the whole education system was broken for an old bureaucratic system that is outdated. And if you just put a school in the clouds,
the Prussian system, which Matt is part of, is designed to destroy people's creativity so that they can be cogs in an industrial machine and cogs in an industrial war.
I teach an
public
art
education system.
that's not
a joke.
destroying
Yeah,
creativity.
it's true. It's
What do you
don't need
teach?
it. Homeschool.
What are you saying?
Learn
That's
on,
destroy
learn on the
Come
internet.
on.
The internet's only, it's like almost 30 years old. We're living in the Gutenberg Press 2, bro. This is Gutenberg Press 2. Okay? You don't need the old education system. We have a new one. Khan Academy is free. Colleges, I went to a good college. I went to NYU. And I would not recommend anyone do that. It's just signaling. It's like a Louis Vuitton bag. It's bullshit. It's not a good assessment of the education a person actually got. I know people that went to Ivy League schools, and they are nothing compared to the people I met on Craigslist who would reach out to people that went to these Ivy League schools, right? Look, if you go to a good school, you get a strong network, but it has nothing to do with the quality of your education.
Oh, okay.
The
Hold on.
autodidacts I've met online are superiorly educated.
Yep, we get the point. So, Matt, what do you think, Matt? Do you think that schooling is outdated, or do you think that there needs to be a revamp?
More the same joke.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to leave it after this. I've got a 12-hour day at work tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And,
We're gonna end it soon.
I'm 4 hours away from that. So, but I do want to say that I think that the university system is not ideal. But I do think I disagree with Jules that when he says that the public education system is failing. That's a fallacy that's pushed by these.
Actual performance has dropped year by year.
No, it has. No.
Yes, it has. You get a lot higher test scores, but lower actual performance. Anybody in business has to train everybody who comes out of college.
Because moving the bar. That's why.
No, you would condemn people to more of that. That's the problem with you, is you would condemn people to more of what's failing them.
But
and it's not a light subject.
Walk out of college and do the job that he's been trained to
You're
do,
condemning
and the school has failed him.
It's not a debate subject. This is reality.
All right. Well, that was a blast, wasn't it?
Thank you, Steele.
Yeah, but thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate you coming on Dead Nation, and I enjoyed your. You're a very uplifting speaker, actually, when you were on the debate. I thought you were very well composed, very uplifting, and I hope we didn't put you off the day after tomorrow. Hopefully you get some good rest, with what you got left. And thank you so much for coming on.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, fantastic.
Matt, thanks
Good work.
for putting up with me, buddy. Love you, man. You did great.
Good day
You did great,
tomorrow,
man.
Matt.
Yeah, Mr. Shakti.
Keep at it. Keep at it, man. It's a good fight.
Thank you very much. Well, that was Matt Taylor there. Very interesting. So we got two capitalist guys versus the big government guy, and well, like I agree with you guys in a way, well intentioned, but there are the reason that I fall into some of this big government stuff is mainly because of national security issues, especially with a small country like mine. if we privatize the whole health system, you know, our country, our people wouldn't actually own it because it would be gobbled up by a foreign power, and they would basically nationalize our health system, and so we'd be owned by a foreign power, and that's my biggest concern is national security issues. America, I'm not worried about so much because, yeah, it's such a big country. I mean, a country like China couldn't gobble up its whole healthcare system. You're right. You were going to say something. You were on track to saying something there. Medicare has been a failure, Mr. Shatke, and absolutely it has. You guys spend 18% of your GDP or more on healthcare, and it does virtually nothing. It's one of the most inefficient systems in the world, and you know, and each president just keeps boosting it up, regardless of what they say. I mean, Trump said, "I'd like a private health system." He's just upped the numbers. Obama, you know, it's all the same. It's all the same rhetoric. It's more bloat, more inefficiency.
Well, I ran the numbers. We spend $10,000 per person served by the VA. The Medicare revamp that they did to basically make Medicare an HMO brought their cost down to $12,000. It used to cost 3 times as much to treat somebody with Medicare as to treat somebody in the VA. Now it's almost the same. But the incentive is still negative. Is still all mixed up, right?
Yeah,
there's
distorted.
no incentive for anybody on Medicare to decide, you know, this isn't really important. I don't need to see the doctor. There's no incentive. There's no incentive for anybody for any Medicare doctor to say, you know what, you really don't need a hip replacement. No, instead they say, you know, Medicare will pay for your hip replacement.
You know,
So,
one of my aunties, you know, on this point, you know, on this free stuff point, one of my aunties, even though she had very good teeth, you know, they were just knocking out everybody's teeth because back in the day, because the government had an incentive program to replace your teeth with false teeth, and they said, oh, why not take advantage of it? So she's grown up her whole life, and a whole bunch of people in that town who are around her age, they all have false teeth, and they all had great teeth, and they all have false teeth now because the incentives were all mucked up, and it was just more, it was just all, you know, cheaper to get false teeth. So everyone's got false.
Well,
They're all
it's like
walking
that
around
on
with false.
Medicare now. If you're on Medicare, they will pay for your dentures, but they won't pay for a dentist to do a filling.
Exactly. It's messed up, you know, and this is the big problem. There's
You know, the filling is $90, and the dentures are thousands. But
I feel like that's something the dentists would put in there because they'd rather be providing $1,000 service than a $90 service. They're like, wait a second. So I'm a dentist, and you're telling me the government is going to pay for someone else to have a therapy? Well, don't give them fillings. How am I ever going to sell them dentures? Which is what I really want to sell them.
This is the point.
Let me tell you why I understand this, okay? I am disabled. Me and my wife are both unfortunately disabled. I expected to be able to get work after getting my master's degree. I actually had a job lined up, and they decided to not hire me after actually not even their background check, but a background check by an apartment they wanted to rent to me. They wanted to rent for me. They were fine with me. They had done all that they needed to do, but then they wanted to rent apartments for everybody, and that wound up losing me the job. It was hilarious. It's just like crazy.
There's a problem.
Anything where you're given everything by somebody, the more that they give you, the more stake they have in things that should be private. Okay? So if I'm the government guy, right, and I'm looking at a bunch of people who I'm paying for, in my mind, right, because it's not, you know, I'm the responsible custodian of the public funds. So now I am worried about whether they're drinking soda too much, or whether they're eating too many chips, or whether they're, you know, having hamburgers instead of a salad. Because now I'm paying for their heart disease later. And so it's my public duty to meddle in their life. That's no way to do things. That's not freedom. That's not freedom. And that's what we've gotten to. I mean, New York City banned sodas over 24 ounces or something, right? You can't get a Big Gulp in New York City anymore, which was a full liter of soda from the soda machine. You can't do it. They won't let you. They won't. Well, what they won't let is they won't let the 7-Eleven sell that. If they do, if the 7-Eleven puts out the liter-sized cups, they'll come in and they'll give them a fine and they'll take the cups and destroy them. It's crazy.
Well, I guess
everything about government is force.
I guess
everything.
I guess
every time they make the law, it's on pain of death.
I guess that brings us to the closing of the debate. Hey, how did you guys? Did you like your last debate, Chatky?
Well, I got a chance at the end to say what I really wanted to say, which was, you know, we've got to stop making this a popularity contest or a situation of conflict. We've got to say we are all aimed at the same thing, and we're all headed toward that same point, and we want to make that technological advance in and expansion of what it means to be human happen. And we may have slightly different ideas about how, and I may think that these people are idiots for trusting government, but that's their goal. You know, even when they're thinking, oh, we just need a government program, not knowing government programs every time.
Yeah, I think it's a losing proposition.
What did you think of the debates, Jules? Give us your thoughts and summaries and everything of the final debate.
I thought everyone had a very strong showing. I was very impressed by both Jonathan and Ben Zion. I thought Gennady did a tremendous job proctoring the debate and asking the questions, and I thought everyone's recovery after the disconnection was very smooth, and everyone's energy maintained continuity and consistency. And I love seeing the comments in the YouTube, and it's just such a great, I think it was such a great exercise to see everyone engaging in, and
actually,
there's so many great ideas.
I actually never, the YouTube chat kind of disappeared for me. Maybe it's because it's an old browser I'm on.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I had a lot of fun, and that's it for the debates. I guess we rally behind a leader very soon after the voting and all that. But I had a lot of fun. I thought that was good fun. You know, I'm a bit disappointed. It's kind of all over. But you know,
I missed Brillen. I was very disappointed that Brillen was not in the debate.
Yeah, me too.
I was very excited. I hope he's okay. I forgot what he said his reason was for not being able to attend, but I just want to send him some thoughts and love and prayers. And I love his profile. I thought there was a lot of wisdom on his transhumanist page, and it was surprising too because at first I felt like I was reading like an epic novel, and then I heard the wisdom too, and I was like, if this is a LARP or if this is like some alter ego role playing, I was digging it. I was with it no matter what. I wanted to hear Grillin talk, and so I hope he's okay, and I hope we get to see him around.
Yeah, I wanted to put a voice to the picture as well. I thought it would have been a lot of fun. He had a lot of interesting ideas. He claimed to do a lot of crazy cool stuff, and so I guess we might not find out. But if I can do a candidate profile with him, even post this, I will attempt to do that to get him on the scoreboard. I think that will be fun. But anyway,
if you could schedule a time to ask him the 13 questions, that probably would give him at least a platform that would let people.
Yeah, we got to encourage all these people to have a voice and have a say, and I think it's really important, and I've had a lot of fun. And thank you, Mr. Shatke. Thank you, Jules, for coming on Dead Nation and assisting me. Thanks, Lev, as well.
Thank you, Steele.
Thanks.
Well,
Man
it's midnight
Steel.
here.
Man of Steel.
Participants.
Have you been up all night or something, Steele?
Yeah, I have. I'm drinking Red Bull to keep going. But anyway, it's all fun.
Well, more power to you, man. You did a great job. Thanks for handling it.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Shatke. Thanks, Jules. And that's
Thank you,
it for the
Shatke.
Detonation's coverage of the USTP Debate 4. Go out and vote. We'll see you later.
Have a good night, everyone.